KJP.
No, it's KJV. KJV.
White House Secretary KJP.
Oh.
Karine Jean-Pierre.
Oh, no, that's not the KJV.
I think we should just call her Karen.
Uh-oh.
Karen.
Uh-oh.
What? No.
Never mind. Welcome to Cross Politics. Pastor Toby Chuck Knox.
Her name is Karine.
The Water Boy.
Jean-Pierre.
Good to be with you guys this evening.
Hey, 4.5 weeks till lies.
It's 6 weeks.
Propaganda.
No.
Are you sure?
Storytelling.
Well, maybe people think it's
The
4.5
serrated
weeks.
edge.
I hope it's. I got so
It's
much.
only 2 weeks away.
I got so many details.
It's only 5 days away.
Hurry up!
You give me a blood clot.
You had a vaccine shot?
Uh-oh. Whenever October 6th through the 8th is, however far away that is, that's when we're going to be in Knoxville, Tennessee, talking about lies, propaganda, storytelling, and the serrated edge. George Gilder's coming, Jared Longshore, Pastor Doug Wilson, Dr. Ben Merkel. I'm going to be speaking. Knox is going to be doing a roundtable with Mr. and Mrs. Merkel, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, talking about the power of stories in your families. We got a bunch of awesome vendors coming.
Yeah, I just talked to the event center today. We got the wine and the beer and the appetizers and the kids' juice boxes.
A jumpy castle,
a jumpy castle
with a paid EMT.
Well, unless we have volunteer EMT there, that's literally
You want to
licensed.
come to the conference for free?
Yeah.
Volunteer EMT. We got
Also, don't forget, if you want that club membership discount, you just got to sign up for a club membership. Go to fightlaughfeast.com, get that discount, $100 off. We can't wait to fellowship with you, sing psalms, celebrate God's goodness in Knoxville, Tennessee, October 6th through the 8th.
And we have scholarships available. So if you can't afford it, we'd love to do the best we can to help people.
The Saturday thing yet?
Well, I was going to say, didn't you pick up an extra talk yet? Didn't we go talk about that?
Yeah. I wrote a bunch of it today.
Did you really?
Did you?
Tell everybody what the time
He was on fire from last night because you listened to Jeff Schaefer and you're like, I got on fire.
I was
the
on
Spirit
fire.
was with you.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I'm gonna do another talk. The real world.
Yep.
Narnia versus Game of Thrones.
That is going to be. Show up just for that alone.
I love that. I'm really excited. So
I love that.
Anyways,
thank you, Toby.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that.
Yeah.
So, KJP. Can we just call her KJP?
Are we
Karine
KJP?
KJP? Can we call her Karen? You know?
No.
Well,
No, that's not her name.
She apparently in 2016, she thought Trump stole the election.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She tweeted it out.
Stolen
2016.
email, stolen drone.
It wasn't
stolen
misinformation
election.
then.
Welcome
No,
to the world
it
of
wasn't.
unprecedented Trump.
Yeah, and then she had another tweet that was similar to this in 2016. But this last week, she was also at the White House.
This is a threat to democracy, you guys.
Yeah.
This is a threat to the whole system
Roll
of
the
government.
clip. Roll the clip.
The president thinks that there is an extremist threat to our democracy. The president has been clear as he can be on that particular piece when we talk about a democracy, when we talk about our freedoms. The way that he sees is the MAGA Republicans are the most energized part of the Republican Party. This is an extreme threat to our democracy, to our freedom, to our rights.
So Eric Schmidt, he filed along with Missouri and Louisiana.
Who's Eric Schmidt?
Eric Schmidt. I think he's the former Attorney General or he's running for Senate now.
Okay.
But he's involved with the Attorney General in Missouri. And he filed a lawsuit against the White House, of various agencies, Facebook and Twitter for all this apparent collusion that was going on during the pandemic. Eric Schmidt. And then go ahead and bring up his first tweet. He just tweeted this out. This actually just happened today. This is late breaking news on Cross Politics. They filed this lawsuit for colluding for the White House administration, including with social media.
Right.
Okay. And this happened. This started back in July 2022. So, a couple months ago's lawsuit. Well, anyways, all the emails are starting to come out that they were able to pull from the White House in discovery. And what is crazy about this, the Department of Justice is refusing to produce a lot of the communication between most of the senior officials in all this.
Okay.
So, but they still produce some. There's some of the emails are floating out. There are some of them redacted. You read through some of them, Knox, and everything.
Kind of like all that top secret information that.
They're redacted.
Yeah, I mean,
redacted.
I don't know what all Gabe has there, but go ahead.
But here's so the White House isn't fully cooperating. The DOJ is not fully cooperating. Surprise, surprise.
Right.
But the private companies have to cooperate a little more than DOJ and some of these things. They found out So far, the DOJ identified 45 federal officials who have interacted with social media companies.
So we're talking
particularly regarding the topic of misinformation.
Right. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook,
all that stuff.
Okay.
Now beyond that, so the DOJ 45, okay, that specifically communicated around misinformation.
Don't you have that slide or something?
It should be up there. I'm talking about it. Haley needs to be with it. Let's go,
Okay,
girl.
there we
Let's
go.
girl. And
Department
then,
of Justice refusing to produce communications. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, 45. And then the DOJ, excuse me, not the DOJ, Meta, that's Facebook, they identified additional 32 federal officials.
Plus the 45?
Plus the 45.
That's 77.
YouTube identified additional 11 on top of this, and that's on top of what the DOJ...
88.
So the DOJ did not disclose half of what they've been able to get in discovery.
Now, these are officials that are in communication with social media platforms to make sure they are allowing or not allowing certain flow of information to take place, right?
Right.
Making sure that KJP, her tweets can stay up.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you question maybe the legitimacy of Biden's election...
And we all went
dangerous.
You remember during the pandemic, we started doing a daily show during the pandemic, a week after the pandemic started, basically in April,
right?
A week or two, and we started doing a show every day. But pretty quickly, guys like Danae Rancourt. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. Danae Rancourt. Wow,
Dennis
incredible.
We are sorry about that.
There's a number of people, especially doctors, were getting nipped in the bud quick, shut down quick.
I don't think people remember, because we're living in a new world, we forget really quickly. When the pandemic first happened, there were all sorts of different doctors on there. I remember a Dutch doctor I was listening to who was like, listen, this is like a cold. There's some people who will need help who are older. You're going to have to get them in certain environments to protect them. But for the most part, it's going to have to run its course, and we'll be at, what do they call that? Where everybody's had it. So herd immunity. Yeah. And so there was, and so all this information was gathered, and you could find it. I remember finding Danae Rancourt on a show and a few other shows. Right. And then after that time period, like 6 weeks, everything began to get shut down. Right. And you couldn't find information. Flow of information was wide and broad. And
we had to contact Danae directly. That's how we got his. Remember, he sent us his graphs and everything.
Yeah, but I
couldn't
remember
post them online.
And there wasn't. And I'm not going to act like that everything was perfect information. There were things that you had to sort through. But the truth is that that's no different than any form of information that's out there right now on any subject. Yep. Weight loss. Yep. There's stuff out there that's just not true.
No. What? You're kidding me?
This powder?
It's like
you snort this powder and you don't lose weight.
I'll tell you, that one didn't work for me. But all of a sudden on COVID, there was this lockdown of information that we had never seen on any other topic before. Right. And
come to find out, the White House was driving it.
Okay.
Right. The White House is driving this lockdown.
But do we have receipts of that?
Yes. Let me bring up. I'm not
88 people talking to them.
Yes.
Are they just saying hi? How's your day going?
Bring up the Instagram one. There's a number of them. You can go look through a lot of the receipts. But there's this White House official emails Instagram and says one more. I think emails Instagram and says, "Hey, there's this fake this Fauci parody account." Is that the right one? Nope.
These other ones are interesting.
They're interesting too. They're all White House officials. Here it is. There's this.
Is there any way we can get this pulled down? It's not actually one of ours.
And the Instagram and Instagram responded and said, "Yeah, you got it. On it." So White House emails Instagram, says, "Hey, pull down this account." This is literally. I don't think we need to understand how serious this is. This is the White House telling Instagram to taking away free speech from Instagram accounts.
So then what's wrong?
This is collusion.
But what's wrong with the White House saying, hey, people are thinking that this is a real account, it's a false account, and people are believing this account like it's really Dr. Fauci.
It's not the White House's job.
So even if it was a bad account that had...
Even if it's false information, it's not the White House's job.
Saying, you snort Clorox and you can't get COVID.
Yeah, and they're like, this is killing people. You guys need to take this person down.
You can't do it.
And so the federal government has no right to say, hey, this is a social media account that we find to be false and spreading misinformation. You guys can't.
I mean, I think what you would have to do is you would have to walk through a process to prove that this is like doing direct harm to people.
Yeah.
Which is different than just misinformation. like you said, there's
But
misinformation.
that involves testimony. That involves witnesses.
Yeah,
that
but you have to walk through a
judicial process,
so that it's really clear that the federal government is not colluding with private companies to take away our First Amendment rights. But that's but a private email is not walking through a careful process.
So would you say that what's lost here is due process?
Yeah.
So First Amendment right is lost. Federal government is
and the Fourth Amendment due process.
Right. And so you got due process. You got two places where they are not upholding the Constitution properly, which is what they're sworn to do.
And
that's what they're
violating it.
Yeah.
So this is an issue of broken oaths.
And this is just like something silly.
Right.
Imagine for something that's really threatening the government and their COVID narrative and who they went after.
Right. Well, and again, back to your point, KJP saying that the White House considers MAGA Republicans
a threat to democracy.
Threat to democracy.
Yeah. What is democracy then?
Right. Well, yeah. Right. Yeah. They have different.
This is not a threat to democracy.
Yeah. Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, so that's the thing is that like, so what the setup here is that if they can shut down accounts for misinformation because Dené Rancor thinks this is a cold or some whatever doctors think this is not as bad as the Imperial College studies speculate tell you if they can do that with COVID,
right?
Which is actually, if you think about it, like something that comes and then goes, the threat to democracy, is something that they can call that anytime.
That's right.
And they can say,
who gets to define what a threat to democracy is?
Exactly.
And you remember that we had a private video deleted off our Vimeo account with Naomi Wolf.
Right.
Because we were talking about Biden's connection to China.
Right.
And Vimeo deleted that private video. If you guys didn't know
I
about this.
wonder if a White House official emailed Vimeo and asked them to take it down.
Why would Vimeo care?
Yeah. Right.
That's a good question. Like, why would Vimeo's like, well, we just like people to post videos and stuff like that.
Because I think our country is becoming a thugocracy.
That's right.
So what do you do then?
It's more like the mob. Mm-hmm. It's like there's
no rule of law. We aren't really the government's not paying attention to the Constitution.
I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Yeah.
And so big companies, Vimeo, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, they know that there's cash outs in legislation, and all that money that we keep passing, the Inflation Maximizing Act, right?
Well, they just passed the CHIPS Act, which is an Intel manufacturing semiconductor act,
bazillions and bazillions of dollars that our Congress representatives keep passing.
Because people,
which gives them more money,
big business to scratch their backs,
bribe Vimeo, Facebook, Twitter, and so everybody wants to be on their good terms and not be you don't want to stand up against them and say no, we're a free speech.
So these government officials should have been fired.
Yeah, no, that's right. But also, I agree they should have been fired, and I would even go maybe publicly flogged. I'm fine saying that.
But we didn't talk about that offline.
But here's the deal: is that's a lot less worse. That's
every
less
time we talk about theonomic penalties. Knox is like, but where's the
flogging?
Where's the flogging?
We don't talk about flogging that much. We've forgotten about that. And I'm like, that might be an actual option. You don't beat your wife, you get flogged.
Yeah, right. Well, it really might cut down on some of this, huh? Public flogging.
Is it Corey Rosen? Corey Rosen is coming on next. We're talking to him about ownership, reinventing companies, capitalism, and who owns what. Next on Cross Politic.
Maybe we can.
I'm not done with this conversation.
Cut down on the thuggery.
That would be nice. I want to know, what do you do when you don't have
when a government's not upholding their First Amendment?
Right, and well, first you got to vote them out.
You sue them like we did, like we're doing,
and then you vote them out. Is what you do. That's the next thing. All right,
you can't vote. You can't vote out bureaucracy.
More Cross Politic coming up next. We're going to talk about this. Remove them, huh? How you going to remove them? You want to tell me about that part?
Home. It's where you build your legacy, where traditions are started, seeds are planted, meals are shared, and stories are told. We are Chris and Natalie Carpenter, owners of Story Real Estate, and our team of top agents helps people find homes in Moscow, Idaho, and around the country.
Have you thought about a move? Contact us to get connected with a top agent who shares your values and puts your family first. Or reach out to us about our Moscow relocation guide.
Wherever you're looking to go, we can help you find home. Call us at Story Real Estate or visit us at storyrealestate.com and start building your legacy.
I wonder if social media what would it be an employee-owned business if it would actually...
Hey, just wait.
be different. It would be handled different. Would they be inclusion with the White House?
Hold your questions. We have a specialist with us.
Yes.
Welcome back to Cross Politic. Today's culture shifts like sand, but New St. Andrews College is established on Christ, the immovable rock.
That's right.
It's a premier institution that forges evangelical leaders who don't fear or hate the world. Guided by God's word, they take the world back because they're equipped with the genius of classical liberal arts and God-honoring wisdom, thanks to a faculty dedicated to academic rigor and to God's kingdom. Find out more today at nsa.edu. We're very grateful to have with us this evening Mr. Corey Rosen. He's the senior staff member and founder of the National Center for Employee Ownership, a private nonprofit membership, information, and research organization out of Oakland, California. Corey, thanks for joining us on Cross Politic.
Oh, thank you. I'm really honored to be here.
So, Corey, what does employee-owned companies, what does that even look like? And why should more companies be structured this way? And I mean, what's wrong with what we've got right now?
Right. So capitalism is a great system in a lot of ways. Capitalism has produced a tremendous amount of wealth. But capitalism, at least in its modern incarnation, has tended to really concentrate that wealth in fewer and fewer hands. Just 1% of the population in the U.S. owns 32% of the privately held productive capital. So why is that a problem? Well, it's not the inequality per se that's the problem. It's the wealth insecurity that's a problem. 50% of the population says it can't put its hands on $1,000 in an emergency. 50% of the workforce who works for a private sector employer has $0 in their retirement account. So since the 1970s, we've seen real wages stagnate, while real costs, health insurance, education, all these other things everybody knows about and struggles with, have gone up a lot. But the people who've owned capital since the 1970s, remember how many digits did the Dow have in 1973? It had 3. Today it has 5. So the growth in capital ownership in real dollars has been more than 8% per year. So if you owned capital, you did quite well. If you worked for people who own capital, you probably, many people anyway, are struggling. So what employee ownership says is a very simple idea. Let's find a way for ordinary people, ordinary working Americans, to become owners of their companies.
Yeah. And so I think I can think of a number of employee-owned companies, but I have a positive view of this and I have a negative view of this. That I see the employee ownership model being very kind of a neat way to attach employees' work to profits. I like that idea. I think there's a capitalistic aspect to it. But then there's also kind of this socialistic aspect to it where it's like it's not fair that employees don't have ownership. There's this kind of this moral socialistic angle that I don't like, that I want to reject. And all this. And so what would like an employee-owned company structure look like?
Sure. So this is not an issue of, well, it's fair, it's not fair. This is an issue of what works, what's pragmatic. And in the typical employee ownership structure, the most common plan by far is something called an employee stock ownership plan. And the way that works is really pretty straightforward. The company sets up a trust, and it's the same kind of trust that your 401k plan, for instance, would be in. But this trust is meant to acquire stock in the employer. So let's take the most typical arrangement. You've got an owner of a closely held company, and that owner's thinking about moving on, transitioning out. They're getting older. And they could sell to a private equity firm, and we all know what happens then. Oftentimes that's a reduction in employment, or the company moves, and the company's sold again in a few years. They could sell to another company, but the other company might have those same kinds of intentions. have family members, maybe they can transfer them to those family members, but that's increasingly common. Mm-hmm. So instead, let's say that they say, well, I'd really like my employees, the people who helped me build this business, I'd like them to become owners, but they don't have the money to actually purchase the shares, but we're going to make profit in the next years. And those employees are the ones who are going to help us make that profit. So here's what we'll do. We'll borrow money. We'll put that money in the trust to buy my shares at a fair market value. Mm-hmm. And then that'll be paid for over time by the profits that these new employee owners create. Mm-hmm. And this, by the way, is exactly the same way that private equity buys companies. They borrow money, buy the company, and pay it back out of the future profits.
That's right.
But in the employee ownership model, the employees are the ones who benefit. In the private equity model, it's that small number of investors who benefit. So
now it seems
what's
to me
interesting about this is that please go ahead.
Oh no, it seems to me that with this model, I'm not against it, but also how are the employees? They aren't taking out any risk really in this. You got a loan that's taking out the risk. The company's on risk for the loan. It's like where's the risk for the employees to participate in this?
Well, of course, the company could go bankrupt, so they don't pay the loan. It's a non-recourse loan. The employees don't have to take out their spouses to do this. And if it were, nobody would do this. But I think it's worth looking at a couple of things with this. First is, who supports this? Well, this is an idea that's been supported by everybody from Ron Johnson, the U.S. Senator from Wisconsin, very conservative, to Bernie Sanders, from the Republican Party platform to the Center for American Progress, from Ted Kennedy to Ronald Reagan. It's, in fact, the only policy that all three Jessies agreed on, Helms, Jackson, and Vera. So from the Republican conservative standpoint, this is what could be better, more capitalists. That's making capitalism even more capitalistic by making more capitalists.
Does Bernie know that?
From the liberal standpoint, it seems more equitable.
Okay, so I get you there.
Are the employees
I get you.
Well, what I'm saying is, are the employees somehow getting too good a deal from this? Well, it only works if those impact these loans. Unfortunately, we have lots of data. The default rate on ESOP loans, so how many of those loans don't get repaid, is 2 per 1,000 per year. So essentially 0. Mm-hmm. So nobody loses here. The owners get a fair price. They get to preserve the legacy of the company they've built. The community wins because you've got more people with more wealth to invest in the community. And it turns out that the employees have retirement accounts about 3 times what the retirement accounts of people in comparable companies that have retirement plans are.
Wow. So run a scenario with me on this.
Go ahead, Gabe. Just take the whole show. What if just hey, Pastor, I'll chill over here with you.
That's all right. We're gonna hang out over here.
Go ahead. You got a question?
No, you got it.
Because I'm looking into this. What if Facebook was an employee-owned company? How would it function differently in the market? We just got our news segment. We just covered the recent White House collusion with social media on misinformation, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and the White House basically violating First Amendment rights and trying to working with Instagram to censor people and so forth. Would this kind of thing play out differently if it's employee owned?
It's hard to say now how it would play out in those sorts of political terms. And there's plans other than ESOPs, is that they're really focused on the employees getting a financial benefit. The employees don't have a governance role typically in these companies. They may have, and ESOP companies typically do, a lot of opportunities to contribute ideas and information, but they're not setting policy for the company. So at Facebook, they actually give everybody restricted stock or stock options, and Facebook a lot of millionaires when it went public amongst its ordinary employees, but it doesn't change their governance. I do think when you look at public companies, though, that if you're the CEO of a public company, what are you worried about? You're worried about next quarter's earnings, because if they're not good, your investors, quote unquote investors, who aren't really investors, they're more like people betting on a horse at the racetrack. Mm-hmm. They're not there to invest their money long term. Your stock buyers are going to sell their stock. So there's not much incentive for CEOs of public companies to focus on whatever their values are for the long term, because they're not going to be around for the long term. But in employee-owned companies, they think of themselves as companies here for the long term and can think about what does that mean in terms of the kinds of policies that we should be instituting to make this a sustainable company. You know, companies like Publix, one of the largest employee-owned company in the country, Publix has been employee-owned since the 1930s. And year after year after year, it's rated as not just as the best supermarket, but one of the best companies, period. You know, has an avid follower base.
Yeah.
And it's because these companies can think about the long term.
Why aren't more companies organized this way, Corey?
There's a lot of barriers. The most important is, and I hope this show helps on this, the most important is that particularly the most likely target audience, which is owners of closely held businesses thinking about what do I want to do with my business, they don't know about ESOPs mostly. They don't know how they work, or they've heard something and what they've heard is misleading or wrong. Or worse, they go to an advisor. And frankly, most advisors would rather they sell to someone else because they can make more money if they sell them to another company, because they get a percentage of the transaction fee that way.
Right.
And they don't get that if the company uses an ESOP. So that's a big barrier. It would also help if there were more financial support for this, the way there is, for instance, states spend over $100 billion a year in incentives for a company to move from one state to another, which creates no new jobs and just costs taxpayer money. If some of that money could instead be used to keep these companies in their community as employee-owned for vastly less, millions, not billions, we could create a lot more employee-owned companies.
Ownership, reinventing companies, capitalism, and who owns what. Corey Rosen, you gonna hang around for the backstage? Because I actually have a couple more questions for you since I didn't get a chance to ask many at all.
Thanks. And by the way, the book actually, it's reinventing capitalism and who owns what. And I may have misstated the title when we communicated.
Oh yeah, that's all right.
That's my problem. And it's about to be available on Amazon and every place else. Reinventing.
You stay right there.
Companies, capitalism, and who owns what.
We'll talk in a second.
We will do.
Very good.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. If you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic.
Hi, I'm Robert Borton, CEO of Classical Conversations, the world's largest classical Christian homeschooling community. I'm launching a new podcast, Refining Rhetoric. If you like cross politics or just listen to hear what crazy stuff they're saying today, you will enjoy Refining Rhetoric. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. I practice the 15 tools of learning by interviewing great guests, looking at current events, and talking about cryptocurrency.
The season of Augustine and the season of Cassiodorus were very different moments in a crucial transformation that occurred in the history of the Western liberal arts. All right, so just stay like this. How am I doing here? So, yeah, you don't like this, huh? What does a Christian education look like when non-Christians are the ones who control the institutions of learning? This is a question that confronted Bishop Augustine of Hippo in North Africa in the 5th century AD. Augustine lived at the twilight of the Roman Empire. He himself had been trained with the best learning that Rome at that time had to offer. He himself actually came through the ranks and taught rhetoric in some of the best schools. And it was then, after he had come of age, that he converted to Christianity, but he wanted to continue the project of education, but this time for Christians. And so he had to confront the question, what does a Christian education look like when the unbelievers control the field? When they control the institutions, when the whole apparatus and curriculum of learning emerge from a pagan environment. And so Augustine wondered, what is it that Christians should jettison? What is it that Christians can embrace? What is it that Christians can adopt but in modified form? These are the questions that Augustine confronted when he sought to educate Christians in an environment when unbelievers dominated the field. A century later, we see a man in the south of Italy named Cassiodorus, who faced a very different educational landscape. He had to ask, what did a Christian education look like in an environment where unbelievers had abandoned the project of education altogether? The infrastructure of learning had entirely eroded. If education was to proceed at all, it had to proceed on the foundation of Christianity. The Christians had to be the ones preserving education. What does a Christian education look like when Christians are the ones forming the institutions, when Christians are the ones organizing the curriculum? Well, these two seasons in the history of education, the season of Augustine and the season of Cassiodorus, just 100 years apart, were very different moments in a crucial transformation that occurred in the history of the Western liberal arts. We're going to be studying this story. We're going to be going back to the sources. We're going to go back to Augustine. We're going to go back to Cassiodorus. We're going to ask ourselves which of their predicaments most resembles our own. Which can we learn from Augustine's period? What can we learn from Cassiodorus's period? As we confront these questions, we're going to engage these sources, and we invite you to join us here at New St. Andrews College.